Okay, so today we're taking a quick look back at a Resident Evil game I don't think I've actually ever covered once on the channel yet. I have played the game, I've played it through multiple times actually, but I've never actually kind of made a video on it as far as I can tell. So yeah, Resident Evil Revelations 1, it's an interesting one. It was actually released first on a Nintendo 3DS, and then later on it got a release on the PS3 and the 360 and stuff like that. And it's always weird to think that it came out on a DS first. I think this was the first game that did that. And to be honest, it's still pretty good even now. Like, there's just some parts of it that feel a bit clunky, but you know, for the most part, it looks good. The story's good. It was an episodic game as well, which kind of diverted fans at first because that was a kind of a trend at that time where games were coming out and there were episodes. But nevertheless, it was still a good game, and it's a nice change of pace from its previous release as well. So this came out after Resident Evil 4. It does take place after the events of Resident Evil 4, and it's definitely a big tone shift and a big pacing shift and stuff like that. So we're going to briefly go over the story, the gameplay and stuff like that in this video, as we usually do with these type of videos. If you play Resident Evil Revelations, let me know what you think of it. If you haven't, go and play it, let me know what you think. And yeah, here we go. So story-wise, again, to briefly go over it without kind of spoiling too much, the game is set after the events of Resident Evil 4, and you play as mainly Jill and Chris, so the original two. And basically, in the simplest terms possible, there is a bioterrorist organization, and their goal is to kind of infect the oceans of the planet to kind of widespread infect a lot of people. And you are basically headed to this boat to stop them, and well, you head to the boat to find Chris, and then it escalates from there. But the game really does kind of bring back that whole definitely evil super terrorist feel. It also does kind of lay into the BSAA a little bit. I think this is like the first kind of real game about the BSAA. Very early days for them at the moment, but the story does develop on that side of things as well. And overall, I think the story is a pretty solid one. Now, in terms of how the game is laid out, it was episodic. So the thing with that time of video games, I guess, a lot of games did do that. So you had the Telltale games, quite popular at the time. There was other games that did it too, and the idea of it is fine, but with this game, some of the episodes were very, very slow and very, very kind of slowly paced compared to others. And the whole game isn't as fast paced as Resident Evil 4. There's still kind of action, there's still fighting, but it has that very much old school feel where you're more focused on saving ammo, you're more focused on avoiding enemies, you're more focused on puzzles and key items and stuff like that. But yeah, some episodes would come out and they wouldn't be as interactive as others. Don't get me wrong, they all progressed the story quite well, but in terms of you actually playing it, sometimes there was not a lot going on, sometimes there was a lot going on, and it really did differ from episode to episode. I don't actually remember how many there were exactly. I want to say 6 to 8, I think. And you did kind of bounce between the perspective of Jill and her partner, and Chris and his partner as well. So it wasn't always the same characters, which is good as well. It's nice to have that kind of differing perspective every now and again, and obviously they followed on with that in Revelations 2 with Claire and Barry. But I think episode releases is fine. In that kind of vein of games, I usually just wait until it was all out before I played it, because I could just play through the whole thing at once. But it wasn't a bad thing, but it definitely was a mixed opinion. So gameplay wise, we'll jump back to gameplay now. So Resident Evil 4, as you know, very action based game. You can carry a decent amount of ammo, decent amount of bullets. Key items don't take any space up in your inventory, so you can kind of find them and carry on. While some of the things from Resident Evil 4 do exist in this game, it is very much a old school feel. Basically, what they did was tone down the action a lot in this game compared to 4. So, for example, you know, you had very limited ammo, healing as well was a bit more scarce, and obviously you're a bit slower in general. You could obviously carry a certain amount of weapons in this game. I think it was 3 you could carry in this game, as well as kind of a few grenades and a knife. Weapon range wasn't particularly as big as it was in Resident Evil 4. You literally just had like a handgun, a shotgun, or some kind of rifle. And you know, it was a good game. It was definitely a good game, and I think a lot of people kind of, the popularity of Resident Evil 4, I think drew a lot of people away from it, because again, like I mentioned a million times in Resident Evil 4 videos, that game isn't just popular with Resident Evil as a franchise, it's popular with, you know, a lot of people. Everyone knows what Resident Evil 4 is, and to have it go from that to not exactly how it was before that, but to a more familiar sense to the original games, It threw a lot of people off, but the game is still highly praised. Like, it's not a bad thing. I think Resident Evil fans in general really like the first Revelations game over the second one. For me, I don't really know which one I prefer. There's certain aspects of 2 I like, and there's certain aspects of 1 I like, but the gameplay, I think in this game, is a lot more tense, and I do prefer that than Revelations 2. There was one thing in this game that really did kind of get under my skin when I used to play it before, and I keep in mind, before I even go into what this point is, and you probably kind of already know what I'm talking about. It was a DS game, okay, so there was things that it was kind of built for with that in mind, and when they ported it over, yes, they got increasing graphics, but the controls were kind of the same. Not saying it's a bad thing, they definitely changed it to fit consoles, but there was a certain mechanic in the game that was really annoying to kind of pull off, and it was a dodge. Now, I think the dodge on the DS was a lot easier to pull off than it is on the console, but basically you have to kind of like push the sprint button and the X button at the same time at a certain timing to dodge an attack, and sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't do anything, and it got really frustrating, especially considering a lot of the time you can kind of avoid enemies, so you don't really want to shoot them, and then obviously when you get to those combat sections you have plenty of ammo, but sometimes the dodge just won't do it and you can't even get past them. And let me tell you now, the enemies in this game in general, quite tanky indeed, so you kind of do want to keep your bullets for bosses and stuff like that. But yeah, I would say overall the gameplay was solid. There was a bit clunky kind of systems in there every now and again, but that was, again, I think it's based on what you were playing it on rather than the game itself. But the gameplay, again, very old school, limited weapons, limited ammo, limited healing and all that good stuff. It really does capture that old feel, which is definitely a good thing. And then, this is probably the most popular point of the game, I still see people talking about it to this day, but except the single player campaign, there was a mode introduced called Raid Mode, and it was a bonus mode essentially, more action orientated, where 1 or 2 players basically fought their way through certain altered scenarios from the main game, and there would be kind of consistent waves of enemies for people to go through and complete. And once you beat that, you would get these like raid points essentially, and you could use those points to upgrade weapons, buy new weapons, and you could play through the game as different characters while unlocking them as well, which is pretty cool. I think each character did have their different like setups, like their different abilities and stuff like that, so it made it fresh whenever you play someone different. So it was definitely a replayable mode for sure. Again, raid mode did return in Revelations 2, slightly different. I still enjoyed it in Revelations 2, I think it's really fun, but raid mode is a quite popular mode. There is actually a decent amount of people out there that do want to see raid mode over Mercenaries, especially lately. Mercenaries in Village didn't exactly get the best reception. It does a lot, they've improved it a little bit in the DLC with the different characters and stages and stuff like that, but we'll have to wait and see what they do with it. But in terms of modern Mercenaries and raid mode, I would rather have raid mode, but in terms of the old Mercenaries, I would rather have old Mercenaries. It was just a lot more fun, but they're both different modes, they're both quite separate, so you can't really compare the two. But yeah, raid mode was a definite big thing with Revelations 1 and 2, and it is a really popular mode to play. But yeah, that's basically going to do it. Overall, I did enjoy the game a lot. It's a lot more, okay, it's not really difficult, but if you aren't familiar with the older style of games, so looking at it now, if you haven't really played Resident Evil 7 on a hard mode, if you haven't played the original 3, if you haven't played the 2 or 3 remake, it is quite like those in the terms of the difficulty and the kind of iron management and stuff like that. Not exactly like them, but it is more like them than 4, 5, 6 and Village. So if you're a big fan of those games, it might not be what you expect it to be, but if you do like me, like the style of 1, 2, 3, 2, 3 remake, 7, then you'll probably like this game just as much as them. Again, story is good. Again, it does kind of introduce a lot more key plot points that appear later on in the games, so obviously BSAA and all that. And if you're into the storyline, it is a fairly important one to play because it does go over a lot of the backstory of the BSAA and stuff like that, so it's worth checking it out. But yeah, I thought I'd make this video because obviously there's still rumours going around about Revelations 3. I still don't really believe it yet. I think there's still a lot more going on that's not that. So obviously we've got the Village DLC and Reverse coming out in a couple of months. We've got 4 remake after that, and I'd imagine after 4 remake it's going to be 9. So I don't know if it's coming soon. I don't know if it's even real. But I thought I'd make the video anyway because I even covered this game once. I will have to play it out at some point on the stream or something like that, and the second one. I don't have a lot of content for either of those games, but we'll start with the first one, and then maybe down the line we'll go on to Resident Evil Revelations 2. I've had more experience with that game, I've played it fairly recently, and it would be cool to cover the game, maybe stream it as well, and do a playthrough of that. So, thank you for watching. Remember to leave your thoughts on Resident Evil Revelations in the comments down below, and I'll catch you all tomorrow for a brand new video.